Jim, we have a question for the late night drive-thru, and it is from Rusty Shackelford.
Well, hello, Mr. Shackelford. I'm sorry you're rusty.
He is writing from the old Atlantic Grand Prix wrestling territory in the Canadian Maritimes. As an 8-year-old kid, I remember watching Saturday Night TBS wrestling and being borderline traumatized, watching the Road Warriors turn on Dusty Rhodes and driving the shoulder pad spike into Dusty's eye. Can you elaborate on what led up to this angle?
Well, I can't really elaborate on what led up to it because I was not privy to other people's business at the time. It was, I wasn't in the office or anything, so Dusty wasn't running his angles by me. But I can tell you about the fallout because that was right after the sale to TBS went through, and Crockett had sold to TBS, and they'd become the new owners of the wrestling promotion. And it was just a few weeks before that I had done the angle where Paul Lee clocked me overhead with the phone when the original Midnight hit the studio and beat up myself and the Midnight Express. And they didn't like blood on TBS. But, I said, Dusty, my idea was for them to get juice on all three of us. And Dusty, of course, was a genius. He said, well, they've seen Bobby and Stan bleed, but they've never seen you bleed. So just, it'd be you. He said, get a little blood, kid, a little blood. So, of course, it looked like I'd been run through a razor blade factory. And afterwards, he said, I said a little blood, kid. But then just a few weeks after that, he was trying to turn the Road Warriors heel. And he'd already tried with the match in New Orleans where they beat the Midnight Express for the World Tag title. They'd done it in a very heelish manner. And they'd started cutting the promos. And finally, they were going to attack Dusty and stick the spike in his eye, and he was going to blade, not his eyeball or whatever the fuck, but he bladed right next to the eye so that he, it would look gruesome. And basically, even though it was a fraction of the blood that I bled, because it was the whole graphic thing of sticking the spike in the eye and everything, TBS was not happy. And that, among a few other things, led to them relieving Dusty of the book, which led to him then saying, well, I'm out of here. And that really set them off on the fucking bad path because they never recovered. And a lot of people say, well, Dusty's booking was stale or whatever. Okay, look at what followed it. Jimmy Crockett for 3 or 4 weeks, which he himself admitted to us one night, I'm just a maintenance booker. I'm not a creative booker. I'm just going to try to hold it together until we get another one. And then they got George Scott, who had to be fired after 3 months because he had tanked the ratings to the worst wrestling ratings that TBS had ever had since they started carrying wrestling 20 years before that. And then to a booking committee that tried to put the pieces back together until finally Flair strong-armed his way in that August or September. So they should have kept Dusty. But he, a lot of guys were saying, well, he's trying to get himself into a top angle with the Road Warriors. Well, yeah, because he was one of the biggest stars in the fucking business. Why wouldn't he be in a top fucking angle? I wouldn't have turned the Road Warriors heel because it didn't work and people didn't want to boo him. And they had to turn him back right afterwards. And it was like when TBS got upset when Flair did the deal on the Clash where Funk put the plastic bag over his head and tried to smother him. Oh, my God, they sent memos out and they edited. They wouldn't show replays of it. And they said, oh, my God, kids might try this at home. Well, it's not my fault. You got a bunch of stupid kids with a bunch of stupid parents that ain't told their fucking kids, hey, not a good idea to put plastic bags over your fucking head, kid. So basically any violent angle that might get some heat on somebody and might spark the business up a little bit was vetoed right at the start by TBS, which is why they played catch up for 8 fucking years before they finally ever made a fucking profit.
In terms of worrying about what kids at home will do, it reminds me of a Georgia Championship Wrestling angle from either 81 or 82, where Ken Patera was going to have like cinder blocks smashed on him by Jimmy Snuka, and Terry Gordy standing there grabs Gordon Soley's microphone and says, "All you kids at home, try this on your buddies." Because Gordon Soley was horrified that he would do that. But
well, it was the cinder block angle in Knoxville that led to their biggest business they ever did when Stomper put Joe LeDuc in the hospital because instead of breaking the cinder block, he hit him over the head with the fucking sledgehammer. It really put him in the hospital. And that caused people to think to this day that Robert Fuller was a genius booker. But goddamn, I don't understand, because I never had to have, and I know we're going off on a tangent here, I never had to have my mother tell me, Jimmy, it's probably not a good idea for you to jump off the roof because somebody on TV did it. Or don't, fucking drive a 10-penny nail through your goddamn dick because you saw somebody on TV do it, or whatever, or these goddamn goofy skateboarders, or these fucking idiots now that are on goddamn Tosh.0 that do these stupid things on video that can't possibly end well. And they're not even doing it. You can tell they're not even going into it like, hey, I'm going to really make a spectacular dumb fuck out of myself and it's going to be on TV. They think this shit's going to work. I don't understand how that you can't do angles on TV or present entertainment for people with functioning brain cells just because some stupid dumb fuck, whether kid or adult somewhere, is going to do something that anybody with any goddamn cognitive ability whatsoever and common sense would know that is not a good thing for you to try to fucking do.
With the Dusty Road Warriors angle, first of all, Dusty had to have known how TBS was going to react. Was it just stubbornness that he was going to do it anyway?
Probably. Because he's the American fucking dream. He's been the biggest star on TBS besides Andy Griffith for fucking 15 years. So he was going to goddamn do something to do some business. But he probably thought if it got over and it did business and sold tickets that they wouldn't worry about it. But they were at the point of tanking the company, the point where they could have, they could have had alien beings being born on live television. Nobody would have tuned in.
But the second part of this is he was the American dream, but the American dream in '88 was much different and was received much differently from the fans than the American dream in '85 or '86. Dusty was in a unique spot where there were a lot of fans, even fans sometimes in the TBS studio, who were sick of him, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And he puts himself in this position where the Road Warriors, who it was impossible to turn the Road Warriors heel.
Yeah.
I don't think anything could have been done to turn the Road Warriors heel at that period of time. And he does this angle to, again, put himself in that mix, make himself the sympathetic babyface past the point where people were willing to accept him, or at least a lot of people were willing to accept him in that role of sympathetic babyface.
Well, but here's the thing. Once again, the fans in the studio were the people that came every week. Well, I mean, not all of them, but the ones that dressed up like the Horsemen and et cetera, and plus the girls, and the one girl that would wear no panties and flash the camera people and everything, she came every week.
What?
Oh, yeah. But a lot of them came every week and they were smart, but that was because there's room for 125 people in a studio or whatever. And the people were talking about it in the sheets at the time because they were in the centers like Philadelphia and fucking up in the Northeast, where people were starting to get smart and they were starting to like the heels and they knew what was going on and they read the Observer. But the majority of places, even in 88, 89, a majority of places that Dusty went that didn't involve going to the Northeast where the smart fans were, he was the goddamn American dream. And they fucking cheered the fuck out of it. They even cheered the Dynamic Dudes in South Carolina. So imagine what the reception they'd give Dusty, even at that point. So that's blown up a lot in hindsight by the people who weren't on the road every day and seeing that the average fans out in the real towns, not, just the hardcores in Philly, it was still Dusty fucking Rhodes.
Do you think in any way Dusty needed to, again, lack of a better term, be put in check? I mean, he had been the booker for 4 years at that time. And, he was still pushing himself in that top role. Do you think maybe there should have been consideration of him remaining the booker but not being an active wrestler?
Maybe, but I don't know if he'd have gone for that. And remember, Dusty's ego was huge. It has to be a star like that. And, I can't even imagine the workload of booking at that level for that long and making all the towns. And Dusty didn't, he didn't slack off. He was still out there with the guys every night. So, it may have been better, but then again, how do you say I'm going to take myself off the cards and just book when, it would be easy for me to do that or easy for anybody else. But one of the 3 biggest box office attractions of the previous decade is on one side of a wrestling war with people that have a lot more money and a bigger talent roster. So, I can see why he didn't want to do that either.
One last question about all of this. even with the Paulie Midnight Express angle or original Midnight Express angle, I think the moment where the Midnight Express and you look the most sympathetic is the New Orleans match against the Road Warriors. It's hard to watch that and not feel bad for the Midnight Express. Yeah. Truly.
And it was the way it was supposed to be. And we laid it out that way. And it was Dusty's finish. And it was a double turn. And actually they probably got more heat that night than they did with anything else they ever did, and we never really had another match with them after that.
In so many ways, the fans were ready to accept you and the Midnight Express while the Horsemen feud was going on, and of course it ends up ending early when Arn and Tully leave. They drop the titles to you in Philadelphia. But where were the Midnight Express, to the best of your knowledge, going before Arn and Tully left? How long was that feud going to be, and what would have happened? I mean, were the original Midnight Express, would they have not come in if Arn and Tully hadn't left?
No, that would have never happened if Arn and Tully hadn't left. The thing with Arn and Tully could have gone on for 6 months to a year. Because I'm not saying we'd wrestle them every night, but the reaction to it and the ticket sales on the shows that got that match. We actually, in September, which is usually back to school month and after Labor Day and all that stuff, we actually did a better house in September in Richmond, Virginia than they did for the Great American Bash the previous month. Because it was the Flair Luger rematches and Tully and Arn against the Midnight Express with me and JJ in the corners was the top two matches they were taking everywhere. And our checks on payoffs they were the best checks we'd ever had. I remember they were paying on a 2-week period at that point. And, one time we had only worked like 9 days out of 14 only. It was like we had several days off for whatever reason. It was still one of the biggest checks we'd ever got from fucking Jimmy Crockett. So yeah, and they were paying us even better main event money than we made with the Rock and Roll because the Horsemen were figured in and they had to get paid too, and etc. So, point is, we never even got started with the thing. There would have been a title change, and then we would have probably dropped it back, and then me and JJ would have been more involved, and it would have gone to at least the Great American Bash '89, and we started it in September of '88. We would have gone to at least the following summer. On and off, everybody would have wrestled different people, but that would have been the overriding angle for both of the teams just because it started drawing so good and it was doing great when the night they left. So, that's the one, that angle probably is the white whale, right? The one that got away. We could have made a fucking fortune with that thing. The matches would have been insane. It would have gone on forever and people would still be talking about it. And then Tully had to get mad at Dusty and badmouth Dusty to TBS. And then TBS told Dusty he badmouthed him. And then they kicked Tully off the plane, made him fly commercial. And then he got mad and blah, blah, blah. It was such bullshit. But I really wish, and me and JJ would have had a ball.